Welcome to our Urban Legends podcast. I'm Dr. Gloria McDaniel Hall. I've been a teacher, a principal, and assistant superintendent, all within urban schools in Chicago and around the country. Our Urban Legends podcast is a forum for sharing ideas, strategizing together, and supporting each other as we dismantle the deficit narratives sometimes associated with urban education and discuss where and how amazing work is being done. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our next installment of Urban Legends. And as you know, like with the Urban Legends podcast, what our goal is to actually examine best practices of all types in order to make school a more, relationship focused, people focused institution. And today I'm excited because my very, very cool editor, Mr. Kamal Malak, called me a couple weeks ago and said, I just met a woman and you need to speak with her. She has an amazing story and she is here with me. So those connections are invaluable. But we're going to talk a little bit with Miss Jill Speering and hear her story and then kind of get to the conclusion of what that actually means for us in schools right now, like something that we could do differently on Monday, thinking about the message that she shares with us. So welcome, Jill. And the first thing I want you to do is just tell us a little bit about your story, your reflection, your journey in education, and just take all the time you need. And you could tell us about your fabulous book, Rubies and the Rubble.
Thank you, Gloria. It's such a joy to be with you today. And I just love the way that, universal energy, God spirit works to bring us together. You in Chicago and me in Tennessee. It's just so beautiful. And I so appreciate Kamal for connecting us.
Yes.
And so I'm excited about the work you're doing, and love the book that you have written. It's really touched my heart. And we really are kindred spirits, aren't we? We have our lives have intersected in ways that bring us together in a new way. And I was an educator for 35 years. And I taught children to read through writing. So they made mistakes, and I didn't want to focus on their mistakes. I wanted to focus on what they were doing right, because I had lived a life. We'll talk about that a little bit later, I know, but I had lived a life where people around me focused on my mistakes, and it didn't help me learn. So we would write, the children would write stories, and then I would serve as their editor and publish their stories into books. And then the students learned to read by reading the corrected version of their own stories.
That's
and
amazing.
The stories of years.
That's amazing.
It was so much fun. Yes. And I did that for 35 years. And then when I retired from education, I ran for the Metro Nashville School Board, and against all odds, I won. I only raised $8,000, but my opponent raised $35,000.
Wow.
And he was, supported by people from outside the district as well as inside the district. But it was more about how to I think of it as privatizing education. Mm-hmm. So, I think that teachers need to be respected, and it's what we do in the classroom that makes it's not the curriculum, it's what we do in the classroom that impacts our students and how we interact with them, those personal relationships. Yes.
Yes. I say caring over curriculum any day. Yes. Caring trumps curriculum any day. Like, if kids know that you care about, if people in general know that you care about them, and that idea that you talked about, Jill, in terms of making mistakes, like everybody makes mistakes, right? But it's how It's what you do with that information, and it's also what the people around you do with that information. So we can talk about teachers. A new teacher, you know you're going to make some mistakes. Students, we know that they're going to make mistakes, but in a situation that feels psychologically safe for people, where they know mistakes are okay and that's how we learn and that's the message. I would love to see what your students who wrote those books are doing right now. Like, I don't know if you're in touch with any of them, but I know that changed their lives.
Yes, I know of one that her mother told me that she went to college and she majored in writing, and she attributed that desire to write to her kindergarten experience.
Oh, that is beautiful. Okay, so you told me a story about your home life that felt very traumatic, and I'm amazed at what you've been able to overcome in your life based on those experiences, and also experiences that happened in school. So you were having like double trauma happen as a child. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like?
Yes, thank you. My father was, sometimes we are in situations where we have generational trauma, and that's what my family was. And I think I'm not alone in that.
No.
Sadly, but my father and my mother grew up during World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, and my father fought in World War II, ended up having an extramarital affair. And when he came home, he was angry, and he had 5 children. And I talk in my book about the way he would talk to me was, "What's wrong with you? Are you stupid?" So here's my father, this major in the Army, and, we respect our parents. I adopted his belief in me. I thought I was stupid, and I lived up to that. I hated school. I didn't like my teachers. I was just really miserable. And I had a 5th grade teacher who thought as highly of me as my own father. And she would ridicule me in front of the entire class. And it was so traumatic for me that I would get out of the car in the morning and I would lose my breakfast. And it didn't matter if I threw up right there in front of the car line. I still had to go through those doors and spend another day with a teacher who I didn't like, and she didn't like me. And so I consequently failed the 5th grade. And that was such a secret. I didn't want, even after I became a teacher, I didn't want anybody to know that I had failed the 5th grade. What kind of teacher are you if you fail the 5th grade? That's something to be ashamed of. And not only, and there's a difference between shame and guilt. And shame is something's wrong with me. It's not that I did something. It's that something is something wrong with me, vastly wrong with me. So that was a difficult experience. But the miracle of it for me, or the ruby in that rubble, was that my father sent me to a private parochial school the next year. And while I was there, I had teachers who built me up and made me believe, they seemed to believe I was intelligent. And I thought, I don't know where these women got this idea, but they sure have missed the mark here. And then I thought, I'm going to milk this for all I can, expecting the other shoe to drop anytime, and they would know for sure then that I was a facade and I really was not intelligent. But what happened over this year, the second year in 5th grade, was that rather than me staying in that state of disbelief in myself, I began to adopt their belief in me. And I began to do my homework. They were always telling me how smart I was. And, even though I didn't believe it at first, I started seeing, maybe they're right. and I would do my homework every night. I'd ask my mother to wake me up, an hour before I needed to get up so that I could study for the test a little bit more, because I loved succeeding. So I really thank those sisters at St. John Vianney for I think that's the reason I became a teacher. They changed my life.
And it's such, like, that's our connection is so the same, because that's exactly what happened to me. My trauma in primary school was a little bit different than yours, because I was like integrating a school, and when people don't want you around, that's a whole different beast.
Yes.
But having a teacher who believed in me, and I wasn't like the best student, but having her believe in me, like, changed the way that I saw myself. And it's such an amazing message that we got to make sure we send to teachers. Like, the messages, the supportive messages that we send to children about their abilities can be a game changer. Everybody who we talk to can speak to, who was that one teacher who made you feel like you could do it. Everybody has a favorite teacher. And a lot of people have these stories of trauma also. So I know I was listening to a TED Talk with Rita, I think her name is Rita Pearson, and she was talking about these messages that we send to kids about their abilities. And she said she was grading a test, and the test had 20 questions, and this student got 18 of them wrong. And instead of putting a minus 18, she put a +2 and a smiley face on this paper. And he said, "But isn't this an F?" And she said, "Yes, but you're on your way." Like, it's not. So it's like even the messages that aren't that good could be done or given in a more supportive way. And I think that if we all thought that way every single day in our interactions with children, we could change things. So what message would you give to parents about those? Because we get frustrated. It's a pandemic, it's all this stuff happening. And so we might say things to kids that we don't really realize the impact of those in the long term. And in addition, what message would you give to teachers? Because
yes,
I guess yeah.
It's as simple as saying what to do rather than what not to do. For example, when a student is running down the hall, rather than saying "don't run," say "walk." And that's just it's such a small thing, and yet it's got a powerful impact. And my sister-in-law was in elementary school, and they were preparing for a vocal presentation. And the music teacher, asked her not to sing, asked her just to move her mouth and not to sing. And then years later, 50 years later, 40 years later, my brother is with her and they are in church, and my brother's just singing, and he looks at her and he says, "Why don't you sing?" And she said, "I can't sing." And as they had time to discuss it in more depth, he realized that this one comment so many years ago had impacted her to where she didn't believe she could sing. Everybody can sing, and singing is such a joy. So I think we as teachers, as parents, as even ministers, say things sometimes that we don't realize the hurtful experience that the child is going through because of that comment. So I think noticing ourselves, and then once those words have come out of our mouth, to go back and try to rectify that. Invite the little girl, my sister-in-law, to sing at another time, and ask her, what, I was wrong when I told you not to sing. You sing beautifully. And just it's okay as parents and teachers and ministers to claim our mistakes, and we can really, that's the, I think, I don't know that that's, I feel like that's the only way that we can show the child that parents make mistakes too, and sometimes we say things that are not correct, and let the child know how loved they are.
It's so, and it becomes like a habit to say certain things like, what's wrong with you? Or, well, why'd you do that? Like,
Yes.
like those kinds of things. And it's not, it doesn't have a curse word in it. It doesn't have, you know, but it's not, it's the things we say, but the way that we say them. And if we say them enough times, people start to believe them. Children really start to believe them. They're taking their cues from us as to how to navigate in this world. And I think a lot of times, you know, people talk about imposter syndrome, or after we become adults or we're in the workplace, we feel like we don't belong, or we're not bright enough, or we don't have the skills that everybody else has. I think that that's all stemming from things that happen to us in younger years, and messages that we received about ourselves, about our physical appearance, about our abilities, about our talents. The story you just told about the singing is hilarious because, well, not hilarious, it's hilarious in my case, because I was trying out for choir, but I was also somebody who couldn't talk. Like, I hardly could talk, and that's what I talk about in my book. And so when I was singing in my choir, where I was trying to get in the choir, I was trying to do the audition, like the words of the song couldn't really come out of my mouth. And so he also told me, like, okay, don't sing, but you can come with us. You can join the choir. So like, it's two similar situations, but feeling different. And now I don't care. I sing. I do it. And I don't have an Aretha Franklin voice, but I will use my voice and sing out loud even when I'm outside. Yes. So with the idea or the things that you did in your own classroom. So I know you talked about the books and correcting students' work and having them use that to learn how to read. But what were other things that you did as strategies when you saw that there were students who might have had, like, how did you connect them with your own trauma? How did that make you a different teacher?
Yes. Well, like you said earlier, when we get out of our school, our college, and we get into the classroom, we want so much to be a great teacher, but very few of us probably walk out of the college classroom into the school classroom as expert teachers. It takes time. Yeah. And I saw my kids falling between the cracks. I saw some kids not excelling like other students, and I knew it was my responsibility. I want to say it was my fault. Fault is probably too strong of a word, but it was my responsibility to teach every child in my classroom and to help them excel. And so I, got a master's degree. I went to different places. I went to University of New Hampshire and studied. I went to the Ohio State University and studied, and trying to find out how to be able to ensure that every student was able to learn to read in my classroom. And the beautiful thing that I learned, in graduate school was that, this idea of teaching children to read through their writing. And what was beautiful about that for me was that the lowest performing student could teach the highest performing student how to read his book. And so there wasn't these, different
division.
reading.
Yes.
That's right, division. There wasn't that division. We were a community of readers and writers. There was another little boy, and he had already repeated kindergarten, and he was I was a new teacher on the block, and I was a first grade teacher, but I was downstairs with the other kindergarten teachers. So his third year in school, he comes in about a week late. They bring him downstairs. So he thinks he's going to go back to kindergarten for another year. And he is kicking and screaming. And I fell in love with the student. His name is Jerome. And I convinced him that I was a first grade teacher. And but what was beautiful about Jerome was that Jerome was a fabulous artist. And so as the children got their books back that had been published and they were going to do their illustrations, they came to Jerome to get them his support. How do you draw this? How do you draw that? Oh. And Jerome just blossomed because of that experience with his peers, where he was seen and began to see himself as a viable member of that community.
Oh, that is the most beautiful story I've ever heard. That is beautiful. I wish we knew where Jerome was right now, because I know he still remembers it.
Oh, I bet he does. I wish I could find him.
Oh, yes, okay. Yes. So tell us a little bit about your book, because I really want people to understand the lessons that you promote in your text. I just got it and started reading it and have been transfixed. So tell us a little bit about the journey of writing it and how people can get copies.
Oh, thank you. Well,
and tell us about that cover.
Oh, yes. I was telling Gloria about this earlier, that on the cover of my book, there's these students, and kindergarten and first grade teachers will ask students to lay down on a great big piece of butcher paper and trace around their bodies. And then the students get to color in their eyes and their clothes, and they hang them in the hall for parent-teacher conferences. And that's all so much fun. But in New Zealand, they did these replicas of the student on wood. And then the students painted themselves, on this wood projection, and lined the playground with these colorful pictures of students from all sorts of nationalities and backgrounds and cultures. It was just, I was so touched by it. So I got permission to use it from the teachers and principal in New Zealand.
Nice.
So. But after I retired from the school board, after 8 years on the school board, I felt I'd finally realized, because people would say to me, why are you so passionate about teaching reading? Why is that? And they thought that maybe I was getting money on the side or something, that there was some way I was lining my pockets. And so I started thinking, why was I, why am I so passionate? Then I put it together that I was passionate to work with students who had been disenfranchised students of poverty, because that was me. I was teaching, my life had come full circle. And finally, I was able to give back to what I would have loved to have received earlier in my life, and what those nuns gave me at St. John Vianney. So the book just flowed out of me. And when I'm teaching writing to my students, we have opportunities to share our writing in the draft form with other students, and what's called the author's chair, sharing from the author's chair. And I use that same experience, those same philosophies. While I was writing my book, I would give it to different friends and ask them to give me feedback. And one person said, I want to know more about your father. And I said, really? And so a big part of the first part of my book is about my childhood and really the experiences that helped me to decide to become an educator. When I was in second grade, I had a teacher. I couldn't say rabbit. It sounded like wabbit.
Okay.
And so they put me in speech class, and I loved speech class. I had a teacher 101, and she was pretty, and she was sweet, and she was kind and loving, and I loved being with her. And showed me how to hold my mouth and where to place my tongue, and I learned how to pronounce the R correctly.
Right.
But I kept it a secret because I knew.
Wanted to go back.
I knew that once I learned that skill, I was out of there. And I tried my best to hide it because I wanted to stay with her. And she was an astute teacher, and she figured it out. But it's, those experiences, even though they seem small, they are so powerful, because when I thought back about my life, that was one of the experiences. I thought, I want to be like that teacher. I want kids to want to be in my classroom. I want to be kind and loving and show them what they're doing right, rather than telling them what they're doing wrong. And it was really beautiful to have that kind of relive my life as I wrote the book. And then the second
amazing.
part.
No,
Then
okay.
the second part of the book is about my teaching and different experiences with the students, and how really a focus. Yetta Goodman from the University of Arizona said we need to be kid watchers, and that really is the second part of my book. As I was watching the kids and taking my cues about how to teach them from what they were telling me, and how to build on their interest rather than some outside curriculum, build on their interest, their background, their knowledge. And so it's much easier to learn if we can build on something that's already known, rather than something like, oh, goodness gracious, what are they talking about?
Yes. That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. So people can get your book on Amazon. It's Rubies in the Rubble. Cool.
Yes. Yes. The subtitle is An Educator's Transformation from Pain to Prominence, from Abuse to Absolution.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So before we end, I find quotes too that remind me of the story of the person who I'm interviewing, and we kind of end with you reflecting on the quote. So here's the quote I found to reflect on for you, and it's written by, I don't know if you know Marva Collins, but she was a woman who was a teacher in Chicago and was so disenchanted with what was happening to children in schools that she started a school in her own home, and the kids like flourished and did amazing things. But so what she said is, don't try to fix the students. Let's fix ourselves first. The good teacher makes the poor student good and the good student superior. When our students fail, we as teachers too have failed. That reminds me so much of your story. So what are your reflections on her words?
Yes. It's so true. I felt that way. If one of my students was not progressing like I had hoped, it wasn't the student's failure. It was my failure and my responsibility. And it's such a joy to teach when we are teaching the child that's in front of us. And there was a story that I wanted to, that I was thinking about, and it's escaped me. But the experience of knowing that we are doing what's right for the student, and that's what makes us a better teacher. And that's where, the kudos comes. I feel good. I feel good about myself when my students are progressing.
Yes.
And yes, we have this. We hear these things, that are told to us, these sometimes negative comments, and we internalize them as young people, and then they become our inner talk, our inner speech, and learning how to as adults and as teenagers and adults and even older people, as we begin to listen to that inner speech, that inner talk, we can say, you know, that's not right. That's a belief system that came from my dad, or, you know, that's a belief system that came from my 5th grade teacher, and I don't believe that. And, you know, begin to change that self-talk.
I love that message. I love that message. And the other thing that I heard in your story, Jill, was the fact that you went through those struggles made you the person that you are.
Yes.
And so sometimes we don't understand why we've gone through stuff, but it does make us stronger on the other end. Not to say that, you know, I want people to struggle, but I know that the reason why I became a teacher is because I saw the worst of it and then I saw the best of it. And it feels like you did the same. I just wish that you were still teaching and that I had a child who I could place in your care, because it feels like they would just be so supported and just come out different on the other side. So thank you for allowing me to interview you. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you. I'm thanking you for Jerome. Like, I'm thanking you for what you did for him, because I felt that moment I could see him just illustrating everybody's work or giving them ideas about the art for their books. But thank you so much for what you've done for our profession, Jill. And you are an amazing guest, and please come back.
Yes, thank you, Gloria. Thank you for having me. It's just been so delightful to talk with you and read your beautiful book and have this wonderful connection. Thank you so much.
Thank you.